When I finished school, I was thinking about doing nursing, and I'd been doing music throughout my, since I was a child, and I thought that music therapy was a nice way of combining both. And the program had only begun at Melbourne University just in 1977, and I was in the second intake after that. And I had studied that for a couple of years. Then I was really nervous about whether there'd be any jobs. And so I switched into social work. And when I was doing social work, I got involved with a patient with multiple sclerosis. And that led me to seeking advice from the people at Bethlehem Hospital, which is now called Calvary Healthcare Bethlehem, where they have a hospice unit and what is called now a neuropalliative rehabilitation unit. And that got me really interested in that client group. And when I finished training, I ended up working there as a social worker, continued working as a volunteer doing music in the hospital, and just picked up some of the music therapy subjects. And then I got a Queen Elizabeth Silver Jubilee fellowship to finish my training in music therapy in New York. So I went across there to Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Centre and worked with an amazing music therapist within the pain clinic under Kathleen Foley, the wonderful pain specialist, and was so fortunate to be working alongside Nessa Coyle, Bill Breitbart, witnessing this amazing work back in 1985. And so I was incredibly inspired by that. The grant also allowed me then to go and do a 2-week palliative care training course at the Royal Victoria Hospital, McGill University, and I worked there with Deborah Salmon, a music therapist there, who is still there all these years later, and experienced that amazing team as well. And then took off across to Sheffield, where Derek Doyle, one of the pioneering palliative care specialists, was leading the hospice there at St Luke's, and spent time there. So had this extraordinary time in '85 that just really affirmed that this is what I want to do. So I came back to Calvary Healthcare Bethlehem, and the sisters, the little company Mary Sisters, was so supportive when they heard what music therapy in palliative care could potentially offer their patients there, and funded a position for me. So for a while I was working as a social worker and a music therapist, and I was very grateful for my social work training because the music therapy in Australia then was fairly behaviouristly oriented, and that gave me the sort of psychodynamic principles to be able to think about working in music therapy in a more psychosocial kind of manner with patients and families. And yeah, I established then music therapy in the hospital in Melbourne, both with the patients with advanced malignancies, but also with advanced multiple sclerosis and motor neurone disease. So that's how I got involved, and was so fortunate to be working with an amazing team in that hospital, including a neuropsychologist who was amazed at what she witnessed that music therapy could do. She, particularly the patients with eudaimonia, with extreme eudaimonia, and she was amazed at how patients who were not spontaneously start a conversation with people, who tended to lie in bed and not actively participate in any activity, and consequently not have any aesthetic experience in their lives, that they would respond to music therapy when it was presented with communication skills that could help to connect with their abilities, and musical skills that the way music was presented was so important to enable them to be able to actively participate. So her work, her name, Gemma, was very, very helpful in those early years for me to understand the power of music, particularly those with brain impairment. So I was working with patients with advanced cancer and neurological degenerative conditions in the late 80s, and the big emphasis was on evidence that was emerging, and that seemed to be vital if music therapy was going to be sustained and certainly grow. And so I then started looking at about how to research what music therapy was doing. There was no way I could envisage that I could use existing models like randomised controlled trials to evaluate what music therapy was meaningfully offering, and that led me into qualitative research. So I've done a lot of qualitative research to develop understanding and evidence for this work, and largely as a researcher practitioner. And so since '85 I've worked in music therapy, initially in this Calvary Healthcare Bethlehem. I also worked for about 10 years with the veterans in a Department of Veteran Affairs hospital, which in Melbourne, which eventually amalgamated with the Austin. And then I started working at Peter MacCallum Cancer Centre, worked there for 15 years and with the cancer patients there, and have worked substantially also at Caritas Christi Hospice, where I still do music therapy. Been there for about 8 years. What my work as a music therapist involves is offering music to patients with advanced life-threatening illnesses, and it's up to them to decide whether or not they want to be involved or use it. When I meet a patient, I say, my name is Claire, my job here is about just offering only for those interested music. And depending on how the person responds to me then will determine how I then continue and describe what it does. But I might offer a range of methods, and I tend to say sometimes people find that music can just be relaxing or enjoyable. The idea is we explore ways that music might help them get through this time. Music therapy is the creative use of music in a professional relationship with patients to address physical, psychosocial, emotional or spiritual needs. And the idea in palliative care is to help people have the best quality of life possible and to increase life satisfaction. And we don't prescribe music, and that distinguishes us from something like music thanatology. We try and understand how the person wants to use music at this time, and we offer a range of methods to enable that. And anyone can be involved. You don't have to be a musician to be involved. The kinds of methods we use include live music. And so when I offer music in the palliative care unit, I wheel an electric piano around, and I have about 6,000 songs and classical music from all around the world, a variety of genres, so that I can try and offer to play something that the patients and maybe their families, their visitors, if they're there, want at that time. And I find that people tend to choose music that reflects the feelings, the memories, the people in their lives that they want to connect with and gain support with, or have some kind of enjoyment or pleasure related to that connection. Or a contemplative space, a time to be, yeah. And so after I play, I wait, and sometimes people want to reflect on what is elicited for them through that music. Sometimes people will ask me to play the song again. They might ask me to play something completely different. And so I give people opportunity to just reflect on what the song means. And I find that sometimes people gain tremendous support from the identifications with the memories it elicits or the people, but sometimes the lyrics of songs can sometimes enable people to feel less alone. That if someone has written this song like yesterday, you know, all my troubles were so far away yesterday, someone understands. You know, one person told me about the song Who's Gonna Make the Gravy by Paul Kelly, and how when she came to a cancer hospital to have treatment, that song was for her what helped really support her, enabled her to feel less alone. This was a young woman who had to leave her 3-month-old baby in the country while she was having cancer treatment in the hospital for head and neck cancer. And that song it just really encapsulated how she felt, you know, who's going to look after my family? But when I saw her as a music therapist in the hospital, she was totally resonating with Clair de Lune. That music helped to relax her. It helped to also distract from the noises in the next room, which she thought was a dying patient, and she just needed to be disconnected from. People, you know, really can get a lot of support through not only the lyrical identifications, but the musical elements that they might connect with. And we as music therapists, we think about the ISO principle, and sometimes we think about the ISO principle in that we find that people connect with musical elements. There might be sort of up-tempo, upbeat music when, which they relate to when they're a bit tense, but if the aim is to relax, we'll then slow down the music. We reduce excuse me, some of the maybe agitated qualities in the music to enable someone to relax over time. Yeah, so that's the principle of the ISO principle, sorry. Our aims include to offer a supportive validation. A number of people find the prayer. I'm getting asked the song The Prayer quite a bit in recent years, you know, and I think of the lyrics in that song: guide me with your grace, lead me to a place of safety is some of the message. Yeah, people also identify with musicians, and we also have tape libraries, CD libraries in hospitals where I've worked. And so I will also offer to get patients their music that they want. I will go and download music legally for patients as much as I can, because sometimes it's the actual sound of those musicians' voices, and it's the stories of those musicians. A number of the young people, for example, have found Delta Goodrem supportive because she's had her own cancer journey. It's about feeling less alone. I think one of the greatest gifts that music therapy offers palliative care and neuropalliative rehabilitation is our work with people with brain impairment. And that is because the music and the language neural pathways are separated in the brain, so that when you are using both music and language, you have a much greater chance of accessing what is still preserved neurally in the brain. And so that's why when we are working with, sometimes with people with brain tumours, they might be able to connect in with the music and even sing when having extreme word finding difficulties and barely able or not able to speak. And also when I've worked with people, say with advanced multiple sclerosis, with atonamia, they will sometimes sing when not spontaneously talking much. I'm talking about people with extreme frontal temporal lobe damage. People whose memories are impaired can often remember the lyrics of songs, particularly familiar lyrics. And that can be very meaningful for them to be able to re-experience the joy and the accomplishment of being able to remember and sing songs. And that can be a wonderful thing to share with families. And often then in those contexts, the families will share the memories that relate to those songs. And that can be very affirming for patients to hear as well, to validate the meaning that they have had in their shared lives. One of the methods I use and have used quite substantially throughout my career is songwriting. And songwriting was a method I developed back in my own work. There hadn't been a lot of music therapy songwriting at the time, back in the 80s. But it was something that I developed because I found that with the patients with advanced neurological conditions, many were also physically quite impaired. And in music therapy, particularly in the 80s, we were encouraged to improvise. We were encouraged to get people playing music with us. And of course, it was very hard to when you're working with people with quadriplegia. So the methods I was repetitively using was this familiar music and inviting people to choose songs they liked and sing. So I thought, gosh, I need to try and see if I can find something else to do in this area. You know, so patients could have a choice. It was probably also to extend my interest also, but it was just wonderful to start using songwriting, and the method proceeded whereby patients would be invited to select an idea of what they wanted to write a song about in either individual or group session, and then brainstorm a theme. And then I'd give them choices of melodies, choices of harmonies, and we'd come up with a song which the patients could then record and often give as gifts or people. And my initial research back in the early 90s, my first research project was analysing the song lyrics of patients, palliative care patients, and what they were writing about. Most of the songs included, you know, messages and compliments to staff, prayers, many included. Recently, we've looked at the kinds of lyrics that patients with cancer are writing for their children, and that was some published research that's been published in Supportive Care in Cancer. And cancer patients, when they're writing songs for their children, write about the love that they have for their children. They write about who they can turn to if I don't get better. They write about memories that they share with the children and how improved their life have been because of what the children have offered in their lives. And they also sometimes write play songs, fun songs that the children can interact with. One wrote a song about her children being little fairies in the garden and casting spells. And she was in the song and the spells related to her, and the grandparents were in the songs and their father. And we posted this to the children because they were interstate while she was having treatment and she was in isolation. And she said, I know they play it, I know they sing it because my husband tells me they ask for the song, they want to hear Mummy. This kind of work is so important for the child's well-being as well as the parents' well-being, because the children know that they're in the parents' minds, and when they're separated, that's a very important experience. They know they're valued, they're treasured, they're loved, and attachment theory reminds us how important that is for children to have good developments. And if and when sometimes the parents do sadly die, the child has this legacy, this memento. And bereavement theory tells us that those kinds of legacies can also be really important to help promote positive bereavement. And so a lot of the songs that I've helped to write, help patients to write, have become very important legacies that people in their bereavement will tell me are helpful. A number are used in the memorial services, and sometimes the patient's own voices singing recordings that the patients have made will be expressed in those eulogies. Research has showed that the memories that families, friends have with patients during the palliative care experience are vitally important for their coping in bereavement. And so that kind of theory underpins my work when I try and give opportunities for a patient to have fun, developmentally normal experiences with their children, and to create a song together that the children can then have. And my research has shown me that that can be so important. I was fortunate enough to receive funding from the National Health and Medical Research Council to do my postdoctorate on the relevance of music in the lives of people living with cancer across the lifespan. That included interviews with people ranging from 4 to 104 years of age, 138 interviews, both patients with the cancer diagnosis as well as caregivers of people who were still living with cancer, and also bereaved caregivers of those who had died from cancer. And one of the interviews I did with a bereaved caregiver was a mother who was looking after the 4 children of her daughter who died. And in that session, in that work, this mother had done quite a bit of songwriting, but one of the songs she'd done with her family was called Jojo, the Jumping Frog, and all the children made a song about their love for each other in the family, including their mother, and how your mum got up and walked today, and all these stories, these memories of their time shared in the hospice. And the grandmother said that making that song was so valuable. Music therapy can also be helpful for pain control, and the research shows that it's music preferences that can help sometimes. Not always, but sometimes people tell me that music can distract from pain, distract from nausea, help relaxation. So not only in my own work, but I encourage all people to think about offering people their favourite music or their preferred music to deal with some of the symptoms that can arise in palliative care patients. I have looked at CareSearch intermittently over many years, and I find it a wonderful service because it's a repository, it's a little goldmine really, with just so much knowledge that has helped me, and I certainly refer music therapy students that I come across to go and explore it, because there's so much to explore really, and it includes a number of the meta-analyses that relate to cancer and palliative care. You can go there and at your fingertips get a whole lot of knowledge related to music therapy. And also, I was noticing recently there's some online components. For example, I was looking at the motor neurone disease. What is motor neurone disease? I was thinking, gee, that's really helpful. That's certainly something I'll be referring students to who need further knowledge in that. And as I'm looking through, there's just lots of related information that you can access. And I do some teaching. I've done some teaching in complementary therapies, and there's a whole broad knowledge of all the different complementary therapies there. So, I applaud the work that CareSearch is doing, and may it continue to just be expanded. There is a Cochrane review on music therapy in palliative care, and the summary says that there is no high quality evidence to support music therapy in end-of-life care. Please look beyond that. Please understand the criteria that gives high quality evidence in Cochrane reviews. The meta-analysis in that Cochrane review shows statistically significant evidence for improving quality of life according to the trials, the music therapy trials analysed in that study. The reason they had to summarise that there was no high quality evidence was because one of the criteria for high quality evidence in Cochrane reviews is you have to have you have to have blinded participants. Okay, so that's the reason. We need to be very considerate about what is essential for palliative care. 4 of my colleagues in music therapy and palliative care have recently lost their jobs with recent funding cutbacks. We need to be able to offer not only verbal-based and physical-based means of addressing needs in palliative care patients, because sometimes there are just not the words for people to be able to use to describe and to get support for sometimes horrific experiences that these people are having. Music, like art, can be another means through which, and sometimes the only way, that these people can connect with what's meaningful and supportive. In my postdoctorate research, 6 people said, I would be dead without my music. But one of those patients, 37-year-old woman, said, but it's not about survival, because we're all going to die. It's about living.